Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. I hope you all appreciate me because I'm putting my mind and body on the line covering this liberal leadership race. If this liberal leadership race was a prescription drug, it would put a warning on the back not to take them before operating heavy machinery because it will put you to sleep. And that is what is reflected in the current polling. Canadians don't care who any of these people are competing to replace Justin Trudeau. The Liberals are in massive trouble right now. Their government is deeply corrupt and unpopular, and that was already one bad thing, or I guess many bad things, all combined into that one big issue. But another issue is just the fact that there is not a single person with a big personality who can lead the Liberal Party. People have said this online over the past week, and I think there's a lot of merit to it, that the Liberal Party actually probably has the weakest brand of all the federal parties. The NDP and the Conservatives, no matter who the leader is, can usually get an average amount of votes for themselves in any given election. When you put a bad leader in for the Liberal Party, they go from, mid 30s, low 30s, all the way down to 17%, like they had with Michael Ignatieff. Stephen Dion was also a awful liberal leader. When you put bad leaders in, the entire party brand completely collapses because the party has only ever been a vehicle for big personalities like Mackenzie King, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Jean Chrétien, and then Justin Trudeau. And then Justin Trudeau has proven that even those big personalities, if they screw up too much in office, are not getting reelected. Anyways, I want to take you through some polling today just to highlight how little anyone cares about these leadership candidates. Christy Clark, Chrystia Freeland, Mark Carney, nobody cares about them at all. And people are trying to generate some artificial hype around this race, like, oh, it's going to be a big fight between Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney. Is it going to be a coronation for Mark Carney, or the Liberal Party going to all consolidate behind him? If they consolidate behind Mark Carney, it's going to be at gunpoint because nobody actually likes these people. I'm going to keep repeating that as we go, but I'm going to bring up the polls in just a second here. But first, reminder, guys, look at that sign. Like and subscribe. I have a goal of getting to 100,000 subscribers by December. So make sure you do all those things. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Really helps me out, helps the videos go do better in the algorithm. Leave a comment on any of these leadership candidates that you find interesting or if you find particularly awful. In this video, I'm probably not going to be talking about the more fringe candidates like Chandra Arya and Frank Baylis. Frankly, if the Liberal Party was smart, they'd actually probably want Frank Baylis to be the leader. At least he's a business owner, and that's not something very common for a Liberal Party leader to be. But let's get into the polls and start out with Justin Trudeau's impression among Canadians. This is all from Abacus Data. I think David Coletto does a really good job of organizing how he collects the data. And right now, Justin Trudeau, unsurprisingly, is at the worst approval rating of his entire time as Prime Minister. He has a negative rating of 64%. 64% of Canadians have a bad impression of him. Only 19% of Canadians have a good impression of him. The fact that that fell from 23%, which was already like monumentally low for a prime minister, demonstrates, I'm guessing, that really Trudeau only had that high of an approval rating because anyone saying they're voting liberal, they're not going to do it masochistically and saying, I hate Justin Trudeau, but I'll still vote liberal. So the people who are voting liberal are just saying, I guess I like Trudeau. And now that you don't have to like him anymore because he's on his way out, now there's about a 4% drop of liberal supporters even willing to say that they have a somewhat positive impression of him. That's very funny. But now let's move on to the. Actually, no, let's not move on yet because I want to talk about Jagmeet Singh for a second. Man, as soon as Justin Trudeau's gone and people now have to reevaluate if they actually like Jagmeet Singh or not, since Trudeau's no longer around to contrast him with, man, that guy is having the biggest sophomore slump of a leader I've ever seen. Look at this. We went from a negative 39% disapproval rating, which was already bad, jumped up to 42%, and his positive approval rating fell from 31 to 28. That is impossibly bad for an NDP leader. NDP leaders, and I've said this in the past, it is true. And by the way, Polyev is still positive right now, positive rating 41 to negative rating of 38. But NDP leaders usually have a very easy time having like a positive impression because nobody thinks they're going to be prime minister. And if the guy has no chance of being prime minister or influencing politics that much, well, just say he's a nice guy. That's kind of the nice person thing to do. Just assume that he's a a good guy, good person. Jack Layton generally probably was a good guy. Tom Mulcair generally was probably a good guy. They're unthreatening, so you don't really have to have negative feelings towards them. Because of Jagmeet Singh's partnering with Trudeau to help him pass legislation, dude, that changed fast because he actually exposed how much of a radical crank he is to the general public. And so all of the default goodwill towards the Liberals or towards the NDP leader immediately went out the window. So here is a chart, and two of these people, or I believe actually three of them, are not running for leadership. But here are some of the Liberal leadership candidates. Melanie Joly, Anita Anand, and Dominic LeBlanc are all three not actually running for leader. I talked about it in one of my last videos. Melanie Joly put out this utterly pathetic statement. She's like, "Oh, I knew I was ready to be the Liberals' first female leader, but just, not now." It's like, don't say that you are like absolutely ready when you're not actually willing to even throw your hat in the ring. But this question from Abacus Data asks Canadians, basically, if they know these people, please tell us who you think that person is. If you don't know, please select don't know. Chrystia Freeland, 51% of people can name her, 49% can't. Mark Carney, 24% of people can name him, 76 can't. And then Christy Clark, 13% of people can name her, probably all from British Columbia, and 87% can't. That is horrible. Think about it too. People like Melanie Joly, Anita Anand, Chrystia Freeland, they've been in politics, in government now for a while. Dominic LeBlanc too. The fact that even Chrystia Freeland, somebody who has served as the deputy prime minister and finance minister for the last a few years, and only half of people can name her, it demonstrates why being so leader centric for the Liberals has been a net negative for their brand over the long haul. Nobody knows who absolutely any of these people are, and that's a problem. The Conservative Party gets mocked a lot by Liberal Party officials and pundits because, oh, they have some eccentric characters in their caucus. Oh, this person's like a very hard-edged conservative. Oh, like, wow, why do you even let social conservatives into the party? I'm a social conservative myself, by the way, because, oh, they say things that the Canadian public doesn't like on life issues and on other sorts of like cultural issues, which is untrue. Canadians are actually far more pro-life, and you actually poll them on specific policies they'd be willing to pass. But the thing is, it's actually very good to have characters in your party, people with big personalities, forceful personalities. It's a good thing. The Liberals think that they are better people because they're more buttoned down, they're more professional, they're more corporate, they're more consultant like. And it's like, what has that gotten them? Nobody likes any of these people at all. They don't have any reputation at all. And isn't that kind of a bad thing when you have to replace a big personality like Justin Trudeau, the only personality they had? And now all these people are going to have to run on platforms and priorities lists that are either going to look exactly the same as Trudeau or is going to make them look like massive hypocrites because they did the absolute opposite of what they're running on for 9 years. Chandra Arya, Christy Clark, and Frank Bayless are all running on getting rid of the carbon tax, even though they supported the carbon tax for years. So what kind of confidence would you have if they became prime minister for like the 2 weeks they will be prime minister, that they'd actually consider scrapping it? So here is something we have, another question. How well do you feel you know these people? That is, who are they and what do they stand for? 46% of people, these are all people who actually knew who they were, could name them. 46% of people know a lot about Freeland, 34% somewhat, 20% don't know. Mark Carney, even of people who know him, 22% think they know him well, 45% somewhat, 34% don't know. That is abysmal. That these people just no one knows anything about them. Here are impressions of leadership candidates among people who actually know who they are. And obviously, this is going to skew liberal in terms of who knows them. So you shouldn't be too shocked that there's a lot of positivity overall, but it's not that positive considering. And these are among people, those who know them well. 49% of people who think they know Chrystia Freeland well have a positive impression. 33 negative. Mark Carney, 55 positive, 21 negative. Christy Clark, 38% positive, 34% negative. It's just horrible. Openness to voting Liberal if the individual is a leader, 47%. And I think I think you have to, in this question, you still have to have known them at least somewhat. 47% are still inaccessible to voting Freeland, 45 Carney, 50% Christy Clark, and the definitely accessible ratings are the things that really matter. Freeland is the best out of all of them, which is pathetic because her definitely accessible rating is 27%. Accessible, it doesn't even say that I am absolutely going to vote. That's just saying I'm absolutely willing to consider voting for this person. Possibly is like, well, I'll see, depending on what they do. Definitely is like, generally what I see makes me think I could vote for them. But Carney has a 23% rating, Christy Clark, 16%. I have been hearing that Mark Carney is the man to beat in this race. 23% of people would be definitely willing to consider voting for the Liberal Party if he's the leader. Less than a quarter of people are willing to even deign the thought of voting for this man, for like the Liberal Party, if this man's the leader. And this is only counting people who even know who he is. 23%. Like the rest of people are like, you're gonna have to like, maybe like I had to warm up to you first. Like I'm maybe gonna have to learn some more stuff about you. He's gonna have like 5 minutes to let people know who he is. Michael Ignatieff had more time than that, and that guy plowed into the side of a mountain before exploding. And now we're going to run Mark Carney, a central banker, at a time where the Canadian general public is the most skeptical to institutional liberals. We're going to run the king of the institutional liberals. Again, I'm a conservative. I don't like Justin Trudeau, but Justin Trudeau is interesting compared to these people. What like the most interesting thing about Chrystia Freeland is the weird way she talks and twitches around at press conferences. The Mr. Speaker type voice line is the main thing I think of whenever I think of Chrystia Freeland. I do not believe people who pretend that they are excited by these candidates. And whenever you find people online who are like pretending to be excited by Chrystia Freeland or Mark Carney or Christy Clark, they're like consultants. They're all people who are usually paid for their opinions. They work on the campaigns. They're liberal staffers. They don't have opinions worth listening to. There's no random middle class woman or man living in Manitoba or British Columbia or out in Sudbury who's going to vote in this thing. That's why the Liberals have to resist having a point system for their leadership. The Conservatives have a point system, which means that the maximum amount of points you can get from each riding is 100, and then that 100 points get split based on how many votes there are in that riding for each candidate. That's actually a smart system. It's kind of like an electoral college for the leadership. This Liberal Party leadership is going to be decided by probably a lot of ethnic voting communities where people can kind of wrangle people to sign up and vote, or it's just going to be chosen by people who live in like downtown Montreal, downtown Vancouver, and downtown Toronto. That's pretty much it. Maybe some other people from Quebec City might throw in some votes for whoever's the most French-coded candidate, but also that's another problem. That's why I also say maybe you run Frank Baylis. I don't know. Like again, I don't want the Liberals to win the next election. But my motive for actually kind of caring who the Liberal leader is that it would be good for the Liberals to have less crazy leaders. I think that I'd like the NDP to move more conservative. I'd like the Liberals to move more conservatives. I would like the Conservatives to move more conservative. I think conservatism is good. And so if the left becomes less left, that's good for Canada overall because the risk of having one of those parties become the government again is significantly reduced. And I think Frank Baylis at least is kind of like that. I'm not sure if he's exactly fully against getting rid of the carbon tax, but like he's a business owner. He seems to not actually set his hair on fire whenever Trump says something. That sounds like a good starting place for the Liberals on choosing a leader who's at least somewhat like Jean Chrétien. It was Jean Chrétien's birthday yesterday, and it seemed like no Liberals really took to heart the Chrétien legacy when they were like celebrating him. The man cut more of the government spending than Ralph Klein did in Alberta. I think Ralph Klein cut like 26%. I think Chrétien cut like 30%. Guys, consider doing that. He was on to something. Yes, he was only doing it because of the debt crisis, but he was on to something in realizing that some spending can be gotten rid of and the world's not going to fall apart. Anyways, let's move on to the next rating here. This is the perception of being similar or different to Justin Trudeau. The funny thing here is that actually Christie has a higher similarity rating. It's probably just because she worked next to Trudeau for so long, but she was the one willing to slam Trudeau. Mark Carney has actually been secretly influencing liberal policy for the last few years here, and he actually has a lower similarity rating when he probably is the Trojan horse of just getting Trudeau's people back into the PMO. But we have Freeland, who has a 57% a similar rating. Mark Carney has a 52, and Christy Clark, rightfully, because she was like the former BC Liberal premier, doesn't have as much to do with the federal Liberals. She only has a 45% rating. If anything, out of those top three contenders, Clark might be the smartest person to run. I'm not sure if she speaks French, but honestly, who cares? Like Chrystia Freeland, 57% similar rating. With these ratings being so high in terms of similarity, do you really think any of these people are going to shake up the polling? The Abacus data poll has the Liberals at 20%, with people perceiving these individuals as very similar to Trudeau. Only 36% of people see like Freeland is different. Only 41% of people see Mark Carney as different, which is not too bad. But that means that the majority of people already have their minds made up on what you're going to be like. So you're working with half of people, or a little like less than half of people, who consider you even different. That's not even good, but slightly different. And that you're going to have to win like 50, 60% of those remaining people to even be in the game again at all. And you're still probably going to get your butt kicked by Polyev, rightfully so. So here is the preference for leader index, and this really shows the absolute skull-crushing apathy that Canadians have for these individuals. Preference for next leader, 47% are leading the pack with a decisive 47%. Or, yeah, sorry, I mean, don't know has a 47% rating right now. That is a 30% lead over Chrystia Freeland, who is only preferred at 17%. Mark Carney, 13. Christy Clark, 6. Jolie 6, Francois Philippe Champagne 3. Apparently, he was supposed to run. I guess he's not running. Dominic LeBlanc also not running. Anita Anand also not running. Stephen Guilbeault also not running. I'd love for Stephen Guilbeault to run as the proud socialist. That would have been funny. I had somebody yesterday talk about, too bad Anita Anand isn't running anymore because, she was probably the best of the bunch. She was very, professional or very competent or whatever. Like, no, she's not. I don't like this idea where people pretend that all these politicians are like big figures and big forces in politics. Anita Anand is a weakling. That's why she's not running. She's weak compared to Freeland and Carney, which says something. Oh, well, actually, Wyatt, she helped order 88 new F-35 jets. Okay, it's late. This is a very late buy that the Liberals made when she was the defense minister like a couple years ago. Okay, I don't care. And it was also over budget anyways. That's considered like decisive leadership inside the Liberal Party. Asking Justin Trudeau's permission to do the thing you should have done like a decade ago, and then getting like props because well, they did it. Well, she wanted to spend more on the military. Every minister wants to spend more in their area, idiot. But Trudeau just threw in Bill Blair because he's not going to like complain about the fact that his budget's being starved to death because Bill Blair truly has nothing to offer anyone other than his loyalty. But Anita Anand is not a figure. Nobody cares about her. There's this kind of trend from Zoomers on social media. You guys probably don't do this, which is good. My audience is actually usually on average above the age of 35, which makes sense. You people actually care about the news more than people in their 20s. But there are these sort of Zoomer Politico people who like to simp for really boring politicians because they think that the obscurity of the politicians that they support really shows that they have deep political knowledge and they care about policy. If you think Anita Anand is a good leadership or prime ministerial candidate, I don't know what to say to you. Please get a different hobby. because you are not equipped to be digesting political information safely. Uh, Kamala Harris is a better leader than Anita Anand is, a better leadership prospect than Anita Anand. And like, I don't think, for the record, that Kamala Harris is good at all, but that's just my way of basically saying Anita Anand is even worse. Melanie Jolie is not a leader. By the way, everyone always criticizes like Western Canadian conservatives for not having good, French accents when they speak French. Melanie Jolie has a awful English accent. She's like Maxime Bernier and having that very Quebecer way of talking about Canadian politics. It's bad. It doesn't work on a leadership stage. And by the way, yeah, it's nice to have a leadership candidate who speaks French or maybe from Quebec if you're a liberal. But that's why Frank Bayless is good. He has a good French, like English speaking accent. He has a little bit of a Quebecer touch. Jean Chrétien has a thicker accent, but it was kind of his own voice. But he could actually speak well. Melanie Jolie cannot. Anita Anand's boring. Dominic LeBlanc is a non-figure. I don't care that you've looked through their records and they technically did something okay in office. That's not what being the prime minister of a country is about, is having this bureaucratic record where at one point the ball rolled down the right hole. No, that was a very decisive decision they made. Okay, well, if she was an actual decisive figure, she'd be running right now, wouldn't she? But I need to break down this chart a little bit more. So what we have here is this is the 2021 Liberal supporters and current Liberal supporters we should look at. And so right now we see that, like, obviously this is all Canadians. That's why so few people know who the leader should be. But let's go down to 2021 Liberal supporters. So Chrystia Freeland's ratings only rise to 23%. Mark Carney jumps from 13 to 21, and that is probably just because of the institutional pushing of Mark Carney to potentially be coronated. Kirsty Clark, weirdly enough, only jumps to 7%, and these are 2021 Liberal supporters. She's only at 5%, even lower than the Canadian general public with current Liberal supporters. Carney's only at 20 with current Liberal supporters, and Freeland's a little higher. I think people see her as the avatar of the non-Trudeau Liberal to support, even though she was like his partner in crime for years and only sideswiped him at the very end when she resigned out of pure pettiness. Like, I would criticize Trudeau, but she has no real, leg to stand on to criticize him. That's where I didn't care. Like, even some conservatives tried to do this whole, oh, it's another woman that Trudeau's throwing under the bus. No, Freeland is just another person he is throwing under the bus. Frankly, somebody nobody should feel bad for, since Chrystia Freeland helped feed the body of Bill Morneau under the bus to then take his job. By the way, the Liberals should be on the phone right now begging Bill Morneau to run for the Liberal leadership. Because guess what? People don't hate that guy. Not a good finance minister, not a good Liberal member of Parliament, overall was involved in Liberal corruption. Yes, granted, I'm still a conservative. I'm never voting Liberal. I am a very orthodox conservative. I ran for a conservative nomination, got kicked out because they didn't want me to win. Certain people didn't want me to win. I'm friendly with 99% of the Conservative Party still. But Bill Morneau at least probably would have good feelings towards him in both like Quebec and in the sort of Toronto area that they need to gird up. Bit of a smarter choice. He's kind of like the more accessible Frank Bayless. I would go for it. He has a history of criticizing Trudeau years ago, calling out where he's doing things wrong. So he has a credible way of coming into the leadership and actually being seen as a change agent. So if you're like Katie Telford, maybe got on the phone with Bill Morneau. If he ran, legitimately, I think he would take the air out of the room. Jody Wilson-Raybould could probably run for it and win. She should consider it, even though she's actually probably further left than Justin Trudeau is. She gets a lot of weirdly positive goodwill because of the SNC thing, which was good. It was basic anti-corruption stance she took. She was actually a bad justice minister, by the way, helped ruin jury selections through policy changes that made it so that you cannot basically have your lawyer say that I don't want that person to be on the jury. They won't even look my client in the eye, or they're obviously openly hostile. She removed that because there's too much bias in jury selection. But anyways, let's keep going down this trail for a second. Preference for next leader broken down into the regions. Obviously, Freeland doesn't do so well in Quebec. Mark Carney does even worse in Quebec. Right now, I think the big thing is that Quebecers don't actually have a candidate. That's where Frank Bayless actually probably has quite a bit of power right now. And then that's where Chandra Arya, as much as people want to make fun of him because he has a really heavy Indian accent, doesn't speak English even that well, and doesn't speak any French, that guy can throw weight around. He's also a Hindu Canadian, which is sort of a demographic of Canadians who don't usually get involved in politics and don't usually have an avatar. I guarantee he is going to sign up a prestigious amount of Hindus around the country. And the good thing about that is they're kind of shotgunned everywhere. That guy is not going to win. But that guy is going to be able to sell his support to one of the other candidates to probably get some sort of big job before the whole government collapses. And that's kind of all they really want. And here is the poll that really shows where Canadians are at. 42% of Canadians want a snap election as soon as the leader is chosen for the Liberals. Only 32% want to wait till October. That is probably Liberals and NDPers who know how broke their party is. And only 18% say doesn't matter to me. I've heard people portray this poll showing, well, a majority of Canadians, when you add these two options together, the 32 and 18, are a majority. 42 wanting a snap election as soon as possible is crazy because Canadians usually don't want an earlier election. Even when before Trudeau was out in like January here, even in December, if you polled Canadians, do you want an election right now? You'd probably only get 20% saying, yeah, election right now, maybe 25%, because it's just kind of one of those like conventional things where you always say, oh, I don't want to have to go into another election. People find elections annoying and stressful and whatnot. Well, when you can get 42% of people to say yes, and it's the plurality of people's options, that's pretty telling. That is very telling. And again, there's another 8% of people who don't know, who probably might side with the election having a crowd right there. But yeah, it's bad for the Liberals. There is nobody who has any amount of actual traction among the Canadian population. In fact, the Liberals might do worse than with a Carney or Freeland than they do with Trudeau. Because you know what Trudeau has that Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland don't have? Name recognition. Well, yes, if you poll Liberals, 100% of them know who Mark Carney is. That was another result that David Coletto released on Twitter. 100% of Liberals can identify Freeland and can identify Mark Carney, a little bit less on Christy Clark. But yeah, that's nice. But you have to get winning people who are not partisans who answer polls on the phone or online. You need people who are watching hockey on television, don't really like the idea of having to line up to vote. And you want that guy to feel like, but dang it, I'll do it for him. And as much as people hate Trudeau's guts, he's at least the avatar for like certain progressive Canadians to say, I vote Trudeau because I'm not one of those far right conservatives. There's at least some turnout potential with that kind of like arrogant self-regard that Trudeau can generate in certain progressive urbanites. But when you come to like Freeland and Carney, who's even going to get out? Who's even going to walk into the voting station if they're walking by the polling station like right there? You're going to have like the guy from like Argyle Lodge mailing in ballots for people for the BC NDP, mailing them all in for everyone around Canada to get turnout from Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland. BC election irregularities joke there. I'm going to be covering the BC thing even more. That story's crazy. Now BC elections and the guy who is like probably fraudulently mailing in ballots are having a fight of who dropped off the bulk ballot mail-ins because it's obviously like wrong what's happened, and people in the lodge are saying basically I was pressured to vote for the BC NDP or they were going to kick me out. But anyways, that's another story. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, Liberals are dying. Liberals have no reason to exist right now, and their leadership candidates are proving that the party is completely hollow without that big personality of a leader. And when you make every single one of your MPs and of your party supporters be subservient to the leader, everyone gets their personality whitewashed. There's not a single real personality inside the Liberal Party. If Pierre Poilievre somehow drops out as the leader like tomorrow, there's going to be a competitive leadership race, and not because nobody has a decisive edge and it's a bit of a mosh pit. It would be like a brawl of people with big personalities, with big like ideological differences between each other. You would have like I don't know who would run in a conservative leadership. Maybe Leslie Lewis again. Maybe you'd have a Michael Cooper. Maybe you'd have a Michael Chong run. You have people who are more like socially liberal, more socially conservative running. People who are more hawkish on defense. People who have a more populist style. People who want cuts in government. People thinking that we can grow. We should just grow our way out of debt. You'd have so many policy positions. There isn't going to be a single policy difference between Freeland and Carney. It's going to be an embarrassing fight between the two because nobody cares. Anyways, so that's it. Like the video, subscribe, do all that good stuff. See you guys later.